Hey there, welcome to Becca and the Balance. I am Becca, and today we are making sun-dried tomato bread. Make sure that you like and subscribe. I'm also over on Instagram, Becca and the Balance, and Pinterest and Facebook. Your free recipe for the sun-dried tomato bread is linked, and you can shop everything you see here. Let's get started. Run your tap on the warm water until it's just warm to the touch, and then go ahead and add 2 cups of warm water to your bowl. Follow it with a half of a cup of whole milk. It does need to be whole milk. And then add in 4.5 teaspoons of yeast. It needs to be dry, active yeast. And then we're also going to do 4 tablespoons of granulated sugar. So yeast loves sugar. So we put this in here, and then we're just going to gently mix this up, and it gives the yeast a chance to proof and get all foamy on top. That's how you know your yeast hasn't gone bad. So mix this up just a little bit. You don't have to get crazy. And then we are going to cover this and set it aside while we're putting together all of our other ingredients. Okay, so then get a very big bowl, and I put in 6.5 cups of all-purpose flour. You're going to leave about 1 cup of flour in reserves to add in while you're kneading your bread and a little bit to flour your surface. Now, where you live depends on how much extra flour you'll need. So when we lived in Montana, it seemed like I needed a little bit less. Down here in the South, it seems like I need a little bit more. Then you're going to add in 3 teaspoons of salt and give those a little bit of a whisk. Now we're going to add our full stick of unsalted softened butter. I give those just a little bit of slices. And if you're doing this in a stand mixer, you can just run this really slowly and it'll slowly incorporate some of this butter for you. I just give it a little bit of a pull with a fork, and it'll all mix in together once we're kneading the dough. So by now, everything should be nice and frothy in your yeast mixture. And we're just going to pour that in there. Make sure you get any sugar that's settled on the bottom. You need all of those ingredients for the recipe. And then go ahead and start stirring. And again, you can do this in a stand mixer. I have some sort of trust issues with stand mixers. I'm not really sure what my issue is, but I prefer to do things by hand. That's just the way that I keep on doing it. Actually, my son had suggested to my husband, hey, mom might need an airbrush gun when I was painting something. And my husband said, your mom's more of a primitive woman, son. She wants paintbrush in hand. And he was exactly right. I don't like a mop. I like to get on my hands and knees and mop the floor. I don't like the stand mixers. I have no idea why that is. But anyway, I digress. So flour your surface. And again, you can do this in your mixer or you can knead it by hand. It's usually about 5 to 7 minutes. And what we're doing here is we're just literally kneading it in. You want to make sure that all that softened butter is all incorporated. And the texture of this dough for the bread should be one that's sticky, but you should be able to press it without it coming back onto your fingers. So it doesn't need to stay. I don't know if you've ever made pizza dough before, but sometimes that one stays definitely pretty sticky. You want to put enough flour in here, but not so much that it becomes very dense. You still want it to be a very moist loaf of bread, no stickiness coming off on your fingers. So work in that flour. Like I said, I ended up doing exactly 7.5 cups of flour when I made this. And this whole process of the kneading was about 5 to 7 minutes. So working your flour, add a little more as you need. I sped this up so you don't have to just stare at me kneading the bread for 5 to 7 minutes. And this is a favorite in our house. So as I'm voiceovering here for you guys, it's been like 2 days since I made this, and the loaf was absolutely gone. My son ate the entire thing. I also brought one loaf, because this recipe makes 2 loaves, over to a friend's house for a play date. And that evening, she sent me a picture that they had sliced them all up, and she put some of her fresh garden tomatoes on them and slices of cheese, and she made like oven grilled cheese sandwiches with this bread, which sounds absolutely amazing. So this bread is a favorite. I give it to people as like a gift when we're going to someone's house. It's just unique. It's not just a loaf of bread. It's so flavorful and good. It's not overpowering. It's just there's something about the sun-dried tomatoes. It's a very warm flavor. The same night that I made this, I added a tablespoon of it to my homemade Alfredo sauce, a recipe that I will share with you soon, and it was incredible. So once your dough is all together, You're going to grease a bowl and you're going to put your dough in there, turning it over one time. And then we're going to cover it and let it sit until it's doubled in size. And there it is. Get 2 standard bread loaf pans and grease those all the way around as well, not just on the bottom, but on the sides. And you can use store-bought tomatoes for these. Just make sure that you dice them up very fine. And when you include your 2 tablespoons for each loaf, make sure that you include a little bit of the oil in there too. That's part of what makes it taste so good. So for my recipe, I use my sun-dried tomatoes. And I do have the recipe for the sun-dried tomatoes linked. Okay, so separate those evenly into 2 little dough balls for each loaf. And start with one, and you're just going to work your fingers in there and kind of press it out into a rectangle. And then I add 2 tablespoons of sun-dried tomatoes into each loaf. And I keep this in the freezer, so there's oil in it. You just don't see it kind of slopping around, but it melts almost instantly. It doesn't change the texture at all. So I kind of roughly spread this around just before I get going on the kneading. Now keep in mind that sun-dried tomatoes are in an oil. It smells incredible. And so as you're kneading this in here, it's a little bit odd at first. You're mixing an oil in with something else. It has kind of a gummy, it's not gack. What am I thinking of? Like the slime feel because of the way it works. So you're just going to keep kind of turning it over on itself, pressing it out flat, continuing to turn it over. Eventually this will all work in. The first couple times I did this, I was like, this is not working. You can definitely do it in a stand mixer as well, but it takes a little bit of working it in there. You're mixing in oil. It's something that doesn't want to be mixed in, but it will mix in. I have also tried to do this before the first rise, and it just does not turn out the same. It doesn't rise like it should, and it affects the second rise. So this has been the best way that I found to do it, and it's wildly successful in my opinion. It's very, very good. So same thing here. This took about 5 to 7 minutes. You're just really, really working it in. Get them little muscles going. But see how you can see it's just kind of moving around. There's a lot of oil there, and that's okay. I've tested adding a little more to it to give it more flavor, and you definitely can add too much oil where it affects the texture in the middle. You don't want to do that. So then you're going to kind of roll it up just like I'm doing, about the length of your pan. Give it a good little shape. And then put it in your greased bread tin. And then we're going to let that rise a second time. So do the same thing with your other loaf. And then we're going to cover both of these and let them rise for a second time. Once those have risen, preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Then we're going to put them in, and I put mine in side by side in the middle rack. And after 17 minutes, I usually peek in here. I give them a little bit of a turn, and if they're already brown enough, I put little foil tents over the top. And what that does is it makes it where they won't brown too much. So they'll continue to cook underneath, but the tops won't get too brown. They need that full 35 minutes to cook. So I put those on there because they're about the perfect brown right now. And then at the 35-minute mark, I take off the little foil hats and I take them out. And then that butter we had in reserve, we are just going to let that melt over the top of it. So this butter came out of the fridge. I forgot to soften some first. So it was a little bit of a harder time working that in. But if you've ever had a loaf of bread like right out of the machine or something and let it cool, it's like a brick. It's because you need to rub it with a little bit of melted butter afterwards. It keeps it nice and soft. So here is this loaf. It is still hot. So take it out of the pan after about 15 minutes, and then I let it cool on its own for about 15 minutes, and there you go. It has these beautiful ribbons inside. Take a look. And it is just so comforting as a flavor. My son could not wait. He was standing right there while I was doing this and asked if he could have a slice. It is so good. Now, these do slice better once it's sat in the refrigerator overnight, then you can slice it very, very evenly. My son eats these right away. If he doesn't, which almost never happens, I stick them in the freezer because it's a fresh loaf of bread. There is no preservatives in it. They can go bad pretty quick. So make sure you double check them. But the recipe is linked.